Okay, everybody, we'll start the meeting. This is the advisory committee for the ARPA initiative. My name is Peter Mason. And we get the agenda. Just to remind everybody, this is a public meeting, and as such, anytime you are asked or want to speak, make sure you say your first name first. We do have individuals who can join us and listen in. There is no public comment section part of the meeting. If you have any questions and stuff, you can go to our ARPA website, and there's an email address there that you can submit your questions and we will answer in a timely manner. With that, let's start with, gotta get to where are you? Okay. Approval of the minutes of March 21st, 2023. Was it March 21st? Keith?
I believe so.
That's when we met. I thought we missed a week. So. Okay. So approval of the minutes. Did everybody get a chance to read the minutes? Okay. Did anybody have any questions or comments or additions? Hearing none, can I get a formal, what's the term I'm looking for?
I move that we
Thank you.
we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Great. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, raise your hand or say aye. Hearing none, minutes are approved. Let's hear the updates from the committee co-chairs. I'll start. Our committee, we skipped a week. And so the last meeting we had was back on March 2nd. And at that meeting, we had McDowell present, and we talked about the changes to the Appendix K. And I'll go into some of those later in the meeting. We talked about developing frequently asked questions. Deloitte's been making started to work through the frequently asked questions. We have the residential committee had a couple of questions they had from providers and from families. We've got a rough draft, so we'll present that to the residential committee this week, and at which point then we'll be able to post those as well. We had a good conversation. It was once again about shared living versus shared housing, which we talked about here. Heather is going to present something to us on her shared living coming at the next meeting. And then we also discussed some of the transformational plans that we knew at that point, and how providers are looking at that at this point. So, and then we took the week off, the week in between, and so we'll be meeting on Thursday. There's no questions. Then we'll go on to the day transformation. Keith?
All right, thank you, Peter. The day committee met yesterday, and we had Maura Fitzgerald from McDowell give an update. She talked about the STEP plan, the supporting transformation to empower people, and it reflects DDS's long-term commitment to move people to greater levels of independence. They developed a logo, which DDS has approved. They're developing the 7 informational videos, which are approximately 3 minutes long. 5 of them have been shot, they still have the employment and the self-direction videos to shoot. The first 5 should be finalized later this month or the beginning of next month. The videos will go to the case managers and providers first, and later will be shared with the individuals and families. We had Betsy from Deloitte give us an update also. She had talked about the plans. They've received plans from the providers in phase 1. 5 plans have been received and another is expected. And during our meeting, we found out that 2 other plans were sent in. So we're up to a total of 7 plans haven't been received and 1 is on the way. Providers in all regions are participating. And just for future meetings, we decided to move to a once a month schedule. And that's about it on the day side. Any questions?
Sure, our
This is-
consultants will get into more of their stuff. When?
Yeah, whenever it's the Arc of Connecticut. Keith, I'm sorry that there are a total of 8 potential day transformation programs, is what you're saying?
8 plans have been 7 plans have been submitted to the regions. 1 is on the way. They were just finalizing their budget. It may even be here by now. As of yesterday, it wasn't, but so I'm not sure if Betsy's going to update people on that too, but she talked about that yesterday in our meeting.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I heard it differently.
This is
Brian?
Isabel from Deloitte, and I just want to specify those are not all day plans. Most of them are actually residential plans, although some of the ones that we found out afterwards. So we've got it's slightly more residential than day, but we have representations from both.
Great, thanks. Brian?
Oh, yes, this is Brian Smith, Assistant Regional Director, Department of Developmental Services. Keith, would you be able to confirm those first 5 videos, the subject matter that they are targeting, number 1, and question 2, do you happen to have that logo that could be shared on screen so this committee would be able to see that logo that you referenced as well?
Actually, I believe Maura and Rebecca are on the call today, and that's part of what they're going to be discussing.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other questions? Let's see, the individual and family engagement.
Hello, this is Greg McMahon from DDS. We met on Monday, and the report from our committee is very similar to Keith's day committee. We had McDowell folks attend the meeting. They reviewed the logo, and we reviewed the step a bit. And then we also had some discussion about one-page program descriptions that are going to accompany the videos. We're in the process of, well, I believe we finalized a template for how the program descriptions will be put together. And we are in the process in finalizing IHS, have a draft of CCH, and we'll be working on other one-pager program descriptions for individuals and families that will accompany the videos. And we'll be working through all the service types to get that done. We also received an update from Deloitte about the then 5 proposals, I think, that we had, and they went over the basic structure of those proposals, which I think was very good for families to hear the thought process of those providers and what they were thinking in their transformation plans. And we spent a good portion of our meeting with discussions about how to reach out to families, especially those that might be harder to reach or marginalized families. We are pretty good at reaching out to a core group of families who tend to be more involved, but we're trying to come up with better and creative ways of reaching out to those who may be more difficult, using community resources, ways of using technology to have a further reach than we do now, and ways to get messaging out to people who may not use technology readily, and also how to communicate with those folks who aren't yet involved in our service system, where we do a pretty good job of reaching out to people who have case managers, but many people do not yet have them. So, and how best to get messaging out to them. So we had a good discussion with many ideas that but it was the beginning of what I think will be many more conversations about that, and trying to come up with some concrete ideas. So that was, I think that covers it, unless Shannon, I've missed something.
This is Shannon Jacobino, DDS ombudsperson. I think you got everything.
This is Peter Mason. Thank you. For the DDS Engagement Committee, once again, we had McDowell and Deloitte also present to keep our committee up to date on what's happening. We were talking about additional ways to communicate and to train our case managers in particular. And so in the month of March, there was a whole series of trainings that were done for case managers. One of those trainings was done last week, which was specifically targeted just for the ARPA initiative and the STEP transformation program. We're working on additional steps that we need to take. One of the items that we're working on is to develop some kind of more locally focused forums where case managers who have taken part of the transformation initiative will be able to present to case managers within their region on what they've done, what they've seen, and how that went. So we're working through that issue at that point. I don't know if anybody has any questions regarding that. Right. Let me just get this. So I'm gonna pass. Right now we have update on transformational initiative. I'd rather pass and have Deloitte present first. So I'll put mine after Deloitte and McDowell. So Betsy, do you want to take it away?
Thank you. This is Betsy Bella from Deloitte. So as Peter said, we have an update on the steps supporting transformation to empower people, transformational model. The research and stakeholder input built an understanding of where DDS can take action to work with providers, individuals, and their families to build a more person-centered system through STEP. And out of this came an extensive list of opportunities. DDS, including regional leadership, identified items to include specifically focusing on STEP. There are other activities happening elsewhere in DDS, but these are pieces intended to build real momentum within the ARPA funding period, and which are directly connected to the STEP goal of supporting individuals to transition from congregate settings to more individualized community-based supports. Last week, Keith sent around a deck to this group with these activities that I will go ahead and pull up right now. I don't know if folks hopefully people had a chance to at least glimpse through, but we understand if not. Okay. So we're going to start here. We are in progress creating a public-facing document describing the transformational model. It'll be more of a summary than the version that we shared with you all today. We wanted to make sure you had all the details. And then it will be moving towards the implementation plan. All right. So as you're looking through, Just some quick context on the organization, especially if you didn't have a chance to review in advance. When you're thinking about a big transformation, there's a lot of different decisions and forces that can really impact how the pieces change together. So frameworks like the driver diagram that are shown here break down the complex problems in a way that helps identify key decision points and the elements that directly contribute to the transformation. So here we've got aims, which is, what we're working towards, the change lever, which are focus areas within that we're moving towards, change ideas and change activities. The change activities are really we're going to focus today. They have here within this presentation a series of illustrative activities or tasks that could fall within them. These create additional context and color is in the earlier discussions. But as we go through today, we're really interested in hearing your thoughts and feedback, especially in inputs on timelines, what you think maybe needs to happen first or maybe should wait. And then any thoughts you might have, especially around those sub-bullets and change activities. All of this information will be really important as we work with DDS to develop the implementation guide, the implementation plan that they'll be following to enact these pieces to really guide STEP. What we've got here is the STEP goal laid out with some more detail. Nothing new here, right? Like, this. And then everything in the model is intended to work towards this goal. It fits into focus areas. So we've got outreach and support to individuals and families considering transitions, work with partners to connect people to diverse employment options, increase availability and use of assistive technology and remote supports, and strengthen existing and develop new community connection opportunities for individuals who receive supports. And in the pub version, there's a fifth category, which is provide strategic and financial support to providers. This is going to largely focus on the STEP incentives, as well as some ideas around flexibilities, which you've already given feedback on. Any questions before we get into more of the details? Okay. So fly on through. And here we have the first change lever, that first category, outreach and support to individuals and families considering transitions. Research, input sessions, and our experience supporting transformations all highlighted the importance of information sharing, especially with the individuals who might transition and their families. So there's 4 change ideas within this one, and the next slides have more detail about each. So we're going to go straight into the detail. I don't want to take up too much of the meeting time, and I want to make sure there's plenty of time for you all to respond, right? So as you look at support individuals to understand options, this change idea focuses on information directly aimed at individuals who use supports and their families. So here again, these bullets are going to shift and change. So if you see something you love, speak up, let us know. If you see something that you're not so sure about, really welcome that feedback as well. Any thoughts as you look at these change activities here? We've got supporting individuals to tour potential future settings with assistance from providers. And that's one that's actually, we've already seen it in some of the plans. Develop document that defines all DDS supports in accessible language. You heard an update on that one from Greg earlier in this meeting. Coordinate peer mentorship opportunities, such as employment clubs for transition candidates. Again, we're actually already seeing some of that in provider plans, as well as it's something that DDS has been considering. So those are the pieces specifically focused on individuals. I see a hand.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'm wondering where outcomes come in. I mean, one can write all of the plans that one chooses, but that doesn't make change happen.
Betsy Bella Deloitte. So when you say all of the plans, do you mean sort of this transformational model, or do you mean the transition plans?
I'm just talking about the way change happens.
Mhm.
You know, it's the plan, you know, nothing happens without a plan. That's true. And it's the right place to start. But there's staff training, there's outcomes measurement, there's facilities, there's investment, there's the fact that some people might not want to change. And that's on both sides. It may be on the team side, it may be on the provider side, it may be on the recipient side. So what's the mechanism to take the words and the paper and the electronic files and affect a new reality? What's the mechanism for that?
Absolutely. Betsy Bella Deloitte. Thank you, Kathleen. So right here is what we're looking at and talking about today is that initial planning, right? And the mechanism for taking it from words on a page to what's the nitty gritty, who gets engaged, how, where are the additional financial supports as needed, what are the outcomes we are looking for, how are things being measured, that all comes in the implementation plan. So it's making sure that as we are moving towards that change implementation of, you know, these are the elements to create real motion towards a more person-centered system, that it is not just, it's making sure that we work through this process along the way to have the stakeholder input to make sure folks are engaged. And then there becomes the actual implementation. So this is, you know, are people comfortable with these being sort of the activities? And then it's, here's how each of those activities ties into sort of change management as you move forward.
So that's the next step.
Next step.
Okay, thank you.
Michael, do you have a question?
Yes, Michael Beloff, parent and agency board member. I think it's also important, especially as we start looking for transformation in day services, as we go from group congregate settings to less restrictive employment. You're also having folks who are engaged for 30 hours a week in a DSO program, and they're now moving to an employment model where they may only have a job for 5 or 10 or maybe 15 hours a week. And I think it's important, as we look for the outcomes in that arena, that the DDS budget be flexible enough to allow those individuals to remain engaged for 30 hours a week. Because if they're in a residential setting, there's not going to be supports for that individual going back to the house during those hours because the staffing is not there. But also the individuals need, you know, they deserve to be engaged a similar amount of hours, and they shouldn't be, well, you know, you're now in an ISA, and you know, individual supported employment, you're working 10 hours a week, and the other 20 hours where you engaged, you're now going back home. I think it'll be important that individuals be allowed to use their budget to be flexible, to do some kind of combination of both employment supports and other community engagements as we go through.
This is Peter Mason. Thanks, Michael. Right now, DDS does allow for multiple authorizations. And so individuals can have an ISE authorization and a GSE authorization for those hours and stuff. The other thing we did is individuals who are in ISE previously, as they received their annual authorization based on the ISE, we're now moving towards that they would get based on their lawn amount, so that they then would be able to use those additional dollars to receive additional supports wherever they see fit.
And I think that that's great, Peter. I think that just parents should be, and families who are going to be organizing this for the families that are doing it, or the DDS agencies that are doing this for individuals that are already in their residences, they'll need to be encouraged to create new kinds of opportunities, because someone who's now going from DSO to ISE, there are folks where it's almost like they've graduated now from DSO, but they're not going to be engaged in a job for 30 hours a week. And so therefore, there may need to be new kinds of programs to engage them, whether it be supports for helping them, go to a gym or have, meetings with friends. Folks who are coming from DSO probably don't have the initiation or ideation to organize outings on their own. And so we'll need to be flexible in order to be able to accommodate those who can't make their own arrangements and are not as independent, to be able to keep them active and engaged.
Thank you.
This is Betsy Bella from Deloitte. So as we move through increased access benefits counseling, you probably recall some conversations related to this element. And as this is where folks have landed in terms of what makes the most sense for DDS right now related to expanding benefits counseling. So contracting with the Bureau of Rehabilitation Services to improve those connections and make sure that there is better access there. Providing information to case managers and providers. These are two separate pieces, but very much aligned, and where there'll be efficiencies across both. But making sure that, we've heard from individuals and their families that their sources of information are other individuals and families, case managers, and providers. And so not trying to put in this top-down DDS is just going to send people a bunch of information, but rather making sure the people they already turn to and trust for information have the details that they need to provide that support. So before we go into the next one, any other thoughts around sort of outreach and support related to STEP? It's certainly not the most contentious.
Whenever it's the ARC of Connecticut, I'm just going to make a request, and I understand that you're trying to go through this and you've probably been through this a dozen times, but can you please make these handouts available? Because I'm sorry, I'm just a believer that the devil's in the detail.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
This is Keith Level at DDS. When I emailed everyone a copy of this on Friday afternoon, so you should have a copy in your email.
Complete with all these bullets.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Keith.
Betsy Bell.
Barry?
So thank you. Playing off of Michael's comment earlier, are you asking for input on, so I'll just, for instance, the integrated payments for, residential day, I know has been an issue, how we can help to create programming that allows people to be integrated into the community. And so using those examples that Michael put out there, those are great examples of where an integrated program within residential could be really supportive to getting people into the community, creating friendships, creating volunteer opportunities, supporting things in a different kind of way. So again, the challenge of the payments plays into that. So I don't know if the change lever could be identified around the payment models or payment structures as a component of moving, some of these services to, different ways of providing them.
This is Peter Mason. Barry, are you talking about like the blended support type payments?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And that's where I know it's not you, but how do we identify it as a change lever that would be really helpful to, more community-oriented, independent-oriented kinds of services.
We can kind of take that back, there's a lot of different stakeholders out there who have a whole lot of different opinions about that. So we can take that back and how to present that. I'm not too sure how to present it, so I'll have to take that back.
Yeah, and it may not be an option for everybody, but for, when it's done properly, or, with the intent that individuals are in the community, they're not in their residential program, but it's that community-oriented staff that are able to do it in a very individualized manner. So for somebody, whether they're meeting up with friends, or somebody who's, creating a volunteer opportunity thing, or somebody who is, going bowling, all of those things could be supported in different ways, as long as they're supporting habilitative and rehabilitative skill building while they're doing it. And it could be done in an efficient and effective way, and reinforced in ways. But again, some programs will do it really well. But if it's an opportunity, it is that absolutely a change. And so if you're looking for change levers, that's one of the options that could be helpful.
Yeah, it could be. My personal opinion about this is that we definitely need a blended supports.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I
idea.
said, I know it's not you. I just, yeah.
And it's, some people will say you can do it within our same system, and just need to be able to give the right authorization in the res account versus the day account. But that's a lot more paperwork and record keeping for the provider, and make it a little much more complicated. So I understand where you're coming from. I just have to see how it can actually be presented.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
This is Betsy Bella from Deloitte. Since we're talking about sort of these community connections, I wanted to jump ahead here, where it's really talking about, this is something that, we are hearing from people, is they are excited about the opportunity for more independence, for transition, but then they're worried about it, right? They're worried about going from 30 hours to 10. They're worried about moving out of the house with their friends into an apartment. And so how do you support people to make those decisions while also creating opportunities for them to, like Michael said, people might not be sure where to start in terms of how to create those connections or find those outings. So here, there are not currently any bullets around sort of specifically the blended supports piece. That doesn't mean that as it moves into an implementation plan that there can't be. As DDS continues to review and refine their approaches and how they are supporting providers. But here we do have some of these elements of, there are mechanisms already that providers are using, and making sure that that is more broadly understood. Encouraging case managers and support teams to emphasize national supports as part of IP discussions. Of course, as part of the Trying the Life course model, this is part of it, but is mixed feedback on sort of how well it's working depending on the specific individuals and conversations. And then, looking for opportunities to help, there's groups that exist that people can already access and become part of, but they might not know how to find them. And so working through the process of helping people understand how to connect Do folks have any thoughts or comments here? Okay, moving on. And I know not everybody had a chance to, dig into the details in advance. You all have our CT moving on support@deloitte.com email address. So if after you take a look through, you have additional thoughts, we welcome them via email as well. Identify and expand opportunities for individuals to engage in community events and activities. Facilitate information sharing and transportation, right? It's not one, you might know exactly what you want to do, but if you can't get there, it doesn't help to participate in current events. And something that came out of some discussions is this idea that, your regional offices even sometimes have people reaching out to them, wanting to be involved in events, wanting to include DDS, and it can get lost in the shuffle. And so making sure that there's community engagement champions to sort of track and coordinate, and then solicit and fund proposals for nonprofit organizations to facilitate community engagement activities. The asterisks mean that something's already in progress, and so is the timeline. But so releasing an RFP on using ARPA funding, it's already gone out, or it's coming out soon, on how they can help facilitate additional opportunities. And then making sure that not only that is happening, but that it gets leveraged back out to the broader audience. Okay. So one back. We can go back to, doesn't link anymore. All right. So here we have diverse employment options. This is, of course, a high priority for a lot of folks. It's not enough to just find a job. It needs to be the job that meets your skills and your goals. Not everyone can go be a greeter at a big box store. That's not what everybody wants to do. And so some of the venues here are working through identifying employers that employ or have employed individuals using supports. We heard this time and time again. Can we create some kind of list? Now, you don't want there to just be a list, because then you end up with people sort of cycling through the same employers, which does not meet that needs of pushing a little further out. But inviting current or recent employers to join a list and share that list out with providers and DDS staff, just gives folks somewhere to start, right? Updating it regularly, but then also partnering with the Connecticut Department of Labor Connecticut Hires Program. So this would identify additional employers and job openings across a broader range of sectors. And using that network as well to socialize those materials about the benefits of individuals with IDD in the workplace out to potential employers. We know that although, in theory, all employers should be prepared to work with folks with IDD, that sometimes additional information about the benefits and how great it can really go a long way to building relationships that help facilitate those connections. Any comments here? And then expanding avenues for non-traditional employment supports. Maybe you have 5 hours at a job a week, but you also like to make soap on the side and you want to sell your soap. Expanding opportunities for those micro businesses, for helping people understand what it takes, how they can do that. And then expanding participation in project search and other internship to employment programs. Most of the activities are really focused on competitive integrated employment. But there are, not everybody can jump straight from, group supported day into individualized supported employment. And so making sure that there are also mechanisms and services and supports to help people along that path. Questions or comments here? And then we touched on this a little bit with the Connecticut Department of Labor pieces, but really communicating that value of IDD population in the workforce to employers. There are incentives related to work opportunity tax credits and making sure that those are understood. Providing training for businesses and staff about hiring and working with individuals with IDD. And then creating materials explaining individualized support employment, assistive technology, and remote supports for potential employers, right? That way they understand that when someone comes in, it is an opportunity for them, not a burden for them. Questions or comments here? Seeing nodding in the cameras. So then that takes us to increased availability and use of assistive technology and remote supports. Now, this is an area where DDS has a lot of work happening and is hiring, the new assistive technology director as well. But it is still included within the STEP model because it is so inherently linked to the work that's happening here. So on staff training support, this is focused on provider staff, creating a statewide outreach campaign with an emphasis on remote supports. Obviously, staffing shortages are an issue across the board, but there is work in DDS related to staffing support, but really integrating in that element of remote supports. It might also bring in people who are otherwise not currently considering, for example, a DSP career. Standing up and facilitating assistive technology learning community to support knowledge sharing. As there's greater uptake among the provider community and case managers, and people start to run into challenges and how they overcame them and meet new opportunities, just creating a venue where people can share both their challenges and what their learning is. Designate DDS staff technology champion to support providers with setup and troubleshooting and create resources for providers. Since providers don't have an extra person on staff who can just take the lead and make all of this happen. And so providing some of that support and information to lighten the load a little bit as they move forward. It also helps, again, with the sharing across. Any comments here?
Kathleen?
Thank you. Kathleen Stow for the ARC Eastern Connecticut. I really like this idea of having technology champions. And I'm wondering if there's a place for transformation ambassadors or champions among advocates, among providers, and among the DDS rank and file and leadership.
Betsy Bella Deloitte. I love a good champion program, right? I think so. I think this is a wonderful idea. Thank you for sharing. Would you like to elaborate on it more at all?
Well, what we do here, and it's very successful, we have out of our excellence initiative, we have something called the Council for Leadership Excellence. And we have 4 to 6 mid-level leaders because, even if everybody wants to embrace change, which rarely happens, there's a momentum that requires a certain level of energy and intent. And so we have a Council for Leadership Excellence, and every year we give people a stipend, and these leaders coordinate trainings. They send out articles on how to avoid burnout. And then people have there's a whole thread, anyone in the company who wants to join in about what they found useful and what they learned when something similar happened to them. And people actually get a stipend for keeping this going. And then when the year comes to an end, the next Council for Leadership Excellence takes over, and the prior council continues to get a stipend for training the new people. So you're A, reinforcing the behaviors you want, B, rewarding it, and then C, keeping the momentum and the energy level up by changing it. But once that person moves on, they're still they still have the status of having been an excellent leader. And so they have kind of an investment in continuing it. So it's sort of like spreading a good virus. To use a very bad analogy at this point in time in the universe.
This is Betsy Bella Delight. No, thank you for that. I think that that could weave really well into the learning community as well. Because that can be a really natural place for people to come together and bring some of that forward. And those do not last long without champions within them. Wonderful. Okay. And then support for individuals and families. Developing and disseminating trainings, making sure people understand the opportunities within assistive technology and how to use them, and starting outreach campaign on potential benefits and ways assistive technology and remote supports can increase independence. This would integrate in with the AT and Me program that's coming out soon, which is sort of a peer mentorship assistive technology program with training, but really making sure that there are demos and that case managers are in the loop so that people understand what's available and how to use it. Okay. And then really improving access. So creating a menu of available AT and remote supports options, increased capacity for assistive technology assessments, since you can't access it through DDS until you've had your assessment, and then distributing grants to fund assessments, equipment, installation, maintenance costs, and training. And those of opportunity grants are open. People are already applying for them. And so these are some of the pieces that will mesh together to create an environment where people have better access to assistive technology as well as remote supports, which are two key tools to leveraging greater independence. Questions or comments? Okay. And then we already talked about this group here. So let's go ahead. These are some pieces that you might be thinking, well, where are these? And these are certainly things that we heard over and over in stakeholder feedback. These are obstacles to transition. However, since they are elements that are already really in progress in other arenas, like for example, on transportation, there's a new transportation committee at the state level and in the DDS level. And so adding additional steps, specific transportation, rather than integrating into that, didn't make a lot of sense. And then, on some of these other pieces, it's this idea of they are important, they will be part of the consideration, right? Like DDS is doing a lot of work related to portability of funding for between, a CLA and departments and all these elements as they think through. But where it's not specifically in the transformational model, just because you can't put everything in, right? Nothing gets done if you try to do everything. But we just thought it was important to flag. And then there are certainly interesting models that are, so STEP includes a commitment from DDS to embracing creative transition plans that providers might submit and collaborating with providers to find how they can become realities, right? Like how does it fit into the waivers? Where do you need additional support? How can they figure it out together to move forward a new idea that might be beyond what they usually think about? We know from previous discussions that some were hoping that STEP would bring new waiver services. These are not currently integrated into the transformational model, as DDS is reviewing opportunities separately. This slide, though, for context, captures some approaches currently delivered within Connecticut. These are all actually specifically delivered within DEMA's programs. And so it does get a little back to what Barry was saying around some of the funding pieces, because these are all models that are funded with more flexibility than an hourly rate service. And so we just wanted to make sure people knew that they hadn't been forgotten. It is in the mix. Okay, so any questions or comments about what we've walked through as a whole? Okay. So what you'll see as next steps is again, we're moving it into a more of a public summary document. It won't have the bulleted detail. It will have some timelines sort of more visually laid out and some more graphics to make it more accessible to folks. But this is the down and dirty way you want to do all this, and anyone who views the recording, but to have sort of more of that level of detail. So thank you for the discussion.
This is Peter Mason. Do we have any overall comments, feedback from the group?
Betsy Bella from Deloitte. Oh,
Barry?
Yeah, so just feedback. Thank you. It definitely is pretty comprehensive, and as Wynn said, being able to absorb the details of it, and I kind of look forward to seeing the executive summary, so to speak, for public consumption. But certainly appreciate that the alternative options are in there, and the ability to think about how we are able to be more flexible in the way that we provide services, I think is going to be helpful if we really embrace the, individualized, person-centered, way of providing care, and understanding that, if all of this is to help people be moving fluidly within the system of care such that they're getting the right care at the right time, and parents, guardians, individuals don't need to worry about, am I going to lose services? Am I going to not be able to get access to that? I mean, the more flexibility we give, and the more the message is, oh, you're in. Once you're in, you're in. It'll take pressure off of people feeling concerned about what am I going to lose if I, take a step in any direction. So certainly that. I think it's loosely, embedded in there. And I think, as we develop our messaging, thinking about that, I think is important to free up both participants and providers in, how do we allow people to move around in the system.
Thanks, Barry. And I'm, I appreciate that. And I also, we understand we can't capture everything, and we know that providers have some ideas that they may not have shared or didn't share it as eloquently. So we're hoping that when they do put in their plans, that they do stretch the limits, and that we can, work through some of those issues that we'll see through that. Some of them we will be able to do, some of them we may not be able to do right now, and figure out how to get there. But I think, trying to identify that, and providers having specific plans on how to do that, I think it will also help us in terms of some of these change things.
Yeah, Barry Simon Oak Hill again. Yeah, thanks, Peter. And I think if we can also help to message it that the plans are that opportunity for blue sky kind of thinking, and allowing for people to be, stretching the envelope with proposals, like you said, doesn't mean they're going to be accepted. And, if the proposals are good, then maybe that's the impetus that allows for pushing, the other state agencies that need to be engaged as well. So, yeah, I think it's good.
And only try.
this is
Thanks,
Betsy Bella.
Barry. Anybody else have any general comments?
This is Betsy Bella with Deloitte. The transition plan templates for phase 2, which are much more streamlined, but still leaving room for that flexibility and blue sky thinking, will be coming out in April. They're going through some additional review with DDS. And then actually, to that point of messaging and communication, there will be also guidance materials coming out. So we'll be keeping you all updated along the way, and gathering feedback where it makes sense, because it's always really great to hear from this group. Thank you for your continued guidance.
Great, this is Peter Mason. Okay, Is Maura on the call to talk about McDowell?
I sure am. Hello, everyone. This is Maura Fitzgerald from McDowell Communications Group. Well, Greg and Keith kind of covered a lot of the update that I was going to give. But I'm just going to share my screen. I've just got a couple of slides for you. And this first one is to the question that was asked earlier about what the STEP logo looks like. So here it is, if you guys can see my screen. This is the STEP logo. It's just 3 different versions of it. But it's colorful, aspirational. The color scheme is deliberately picked so that it's visible for people with color blindness issues. So this is the STEP logo, and you'll start to see this more on the public-facing content that we're working on for individuals and families. The other thing that we were asked about was the update on the video series. So there are 7 videos that we are working on. 5 of them have now been shot and are moving into editing and post-production. So on the 21st of March, we were in East Hartford at a CCH home to film a video on community companion homes. Last Thursday, we were in Meriden at a clustered apartment setting to film videos on assistive technology and remote supports. And then last Friday, we were in Canton to film videos on in-home supports and supportive housing. We're waiting for a timetable from the production company to find out exactly when we're going to be able to start to see those videos come together. But hopefully that will be in the next several weeks. And actually, I just asked them a little while ago for an updated timetable, so hopefully I'll hear back from them soon. And then the 2 videos that are still to be produced are on employment and self-direction. So we have a pretty good handle on what we're going to do with the self-direction video, and we're still working on what exactly the employment video is going to look like. Going along with each of these videos, we are working with DDS to create informational one-pagers. And each video will have a one-pager that accompanies it. The employment video might have 2 one-pagers, one on customized employments and one on ISE employments. But in general, it's going to be one pager for each video. And these one-pagers are going to kind of be like 30,000-foot views of each service. So currently we have one done that's in the editing stage on in-home supports, and it basically gives a general description of what an in-home support is, kind of who it's for, what kind of staffing is involved, what challenges might be seen using in-home supports, and where people can get more information on the support. So we are, after a few meetings today, we have kind of the way that this is going to look. So it's going to our graphic designer, who is going to design a template for all of these one-pagers. So we're working on that right now, and we're working with the subject matter experts over at DDS to gather the info that we need to put together the other 6 one-pagers. And when the videos and the one-pagers are done, I think as Keith or Greg mentioned earlier, they will be shared first with DDS case managers, DDS staff, the help desks, the transitional coordinators, providers, and other community partners. And then we will be sharing them out with individuals and families, and we will have a plan as to how that all will roll out. But we want to make sure that especially the DDS staff and the providers who are kind of the frontline touch points for individuals and families have this information first, so that when it goes to the individuals and families, they're not caught off guard when individuals and families start to come to them with questions about these services. And I think that's all. This is just a quick look at what we're doing for the month of April in different communications fronts. But some of this is going to kind of get rejiggered a little bit because of the timing of the technology and support video series, which is the TNS video series up here. These things in light blue are the things that we have planned for individuals and families for this month, messaging and communications to go out to them. The maroon are messaging and communications that are going out to the DDS staff. And then we have the Deloitte stuff in here so that we can be cognizant of what they're up to and work with them on things that kind of need to be translated from DDS and provider speak into individuals and families speak so that those are available to go. And just one other update that I don't have a slide for, whatever. We are working on building a step landing page that will be on the DDS website. And this will contain easy to find information for individuals and families and anyone else who's looking for it, but kind of a more button-based website. So, you know, there'll be a button to click on for the videos. There'll be a calendar that people can see for upcoming forums and other activities where they can learn more. So it'll just be an easy to see and easy to use website for mainly individuals and families as they are looking to learn more about the technologies and supports and other elements of the STEP plan for them as they move forward. And if anyone has any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
This is Peter Mason. I'm not seeing any questions for you, so we'll move back to an update in terms of the transformation piece. I know providers received a letter regarding the Appendix K that we're amending. I just wanted to go through that. We've put in, we right now have a public hearing that's coming up in May for the amended Appendix K. Once that's been done and we get feedback from stakeholders, we'll then be able to submit it to CMS. Once CMS approves it, then these will become official. So right now, these are only what we're proposing. We feel very confident that they're going to go through, but we can't say that for sure until we see the approval letter from CMS. So some of the things that we've done in this is try to hear what providers had to say. One of the things we heard is that it's a lot of work to put together a transition plan. And with the staffing shortages and stuff, you know, how are they supposed to do that? Not that we can do anything about the staffing shortage, but what we did come up with is a way to reimburse providers for submitting a plan. And if that plan gets approved, they would be able to get reimbursed for that. And we based it on whether they did it for one program in their agency, two programs in their agency, or three or more programs. So if a provider puts in for one agency program to be restructured, reformed, revised, they would get $7,500. If they put in for two agency programs, that would be $12,500. And if there were three or more programs, they would get $17,500. So we're trying to help assist providers in terms of building these plans. The other thing that we heard from providers is that we had an outcome payment for every residential move, but we didn't have an alternative for a day move. And so in this amended version, that there will be an outcome payment for any individual that moves from a congregate day setting out to a non-congregate day setting. That would be a $15,000 outcome payment. The other thing that we looked at is, this always gives me trouble, so hold on. We have specific objectives that we're looking for this, and so we're trying to incentivize providers to move towards completing those objectives. That's not to say they have to do that, but if they do, there's an additional incentive. So if an agency looks at restructuring one of their residential settings to support new individuals with specialized behavioral or medical or clinical needs, and they do that within the confines of the plan, they would be entitled to an incentive payment. If they restructured a day program that will now focus more on employment-based services, that would be eligible for incentive program. If they restructure one of their day programs to support new individuals with specialized or complex medical needs, that would be entitled to a incentive payment. And if they look at ending a sub-minimum wage arrangement in one of their programs, we would then also provide an incentive payment. So if any of those four were done, not only would they receive it for each individual moving out, but once they've completed that restructuring, they would receive an incentive payment of $33,000. A couple of other things that we tried to do also was incentivize some data collection piece. And so we were looking at, we have national core indicators, which gives us a workforce survey. And so we're encouraging providers to do that. And they would receive an incentive payment for that. There'd be an incentive payment also for some training and expectations. So if they do what we call shift, which is an assistive technology training, if they do that, we would then pay an incentive payment for each person that goes through that up to a maximum of $30,000. And there's also an incentive payment for employment as well, which we would also incentivize at $3,000 per person for a maximum of $30,000. So that's the amended Appendix K. The timing of all this, it's all retroactive. So if we do get approval, it will be retroactive to February 1st. And since no provider put in for a plan at that point, all providers should be eligible for these if they get approved. We're looking at submitting that hopefully sometime in May. Unfortunately, CMS has 90 days to approve, so we may not, the latest we would hear back is September. So some of this may be retroactive payments. Anybody have any questions on terms of that? No? Okay. Couple other things that I just wanted to give an update on. This is for our overall ARPA initiatives. The rewarding work redesign website for people who self-determine their resources and hire their own staff. That hit a snag with our IT department. We've now overcome that snag. So we should be seeing a redesigned worksite coming up shortly. We have 4 different types of notice of opportunity grants out there for assistive technology. One is available for individuals and families, and as of last week, we had 34 applications. One is for providers. We had 7 applications for that. One is for employment and using AT in terms of employment. That was just issued 2 weeks ago. And another one is for staff training for AT certification. We had 34 applications. This one actually was with DDS staff, because we're also trying to get our DDS staff going. and we had 34 staff who applied for that. We submitted the assistive technology request for proposal. That went out last week. That's the request for proposal for an agency. It's only be the 1, 2, or 3 agencies that would then be assigned either the whole state or one of the regions to provide assistive technology assessments to individuals. They would then provide what the assistive technology equipment is needed. And that then would go to Pratt. Once Pratt approves, that same agency that we hire the contractor would then order the equipment, install the equipment, and then provide training to the individual. And so the idea is to make it easier for people to get assessments, to get the equipment, get it up and running, all with the same group. So we have designated people who are doing this. It's not to say that anybody can't go to any agency that does assistive technology. We're just trying to make it so that it's a little bit easier, so people can try to move this a little bit further along. And we also did issue a non-project based supportive housing grant that closed about 2 weeks ago. And we got a number of proposals back, which is good. As you may or may not know, we have done supportive housing from project base, which is starting from the scratch, from the floor on up, building the place. But those are like 2 years in the making. Our idea here is if we can get those apartment complexes that are already built, if we can be working with those owners and maintenance companies to work with them so that we then can assign or designate apartments to individuals with ID, we would be able to get more supportive housings up and running a lot quicker. So that's our goal with that. So that's pretty much where we're at in terms of the other ARPA initiatives. I don't know if anybody has any questions regarding that. No. So
Peter,
one of the things, yes.
Barry has a
no,
question.
sorry.
Sorry.
It actually goes back to what you were saying earlier on. Is there a place, and how are we kind of continuing to communicate to providers about that the way to get these incentives, what they are, and how to use them is key to submitting the transformation proposals. And I'm not sure that everybody has connected those dots. And so just a suggestion around, communicating to the families and the parents and all that kind of stuff. I still think there's an opportunity to be communicating to providers in ways that it's helpful for them to connect the dots.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that when you start seeing that the Deloitte finishing up on their piece and then starting to provide that, well, there's going to be a lot of educational pieces to that will be for providers and stuff. And in that, we can also include into that the incentives and how they fit into all this stuff. I know we have a transformational guide, which we have to revise because we have these different new things. The problem that we have is we can only say that these are possible. They're not etched in stone.
Yeah.
And so we can't go out and say you're going to get this when we don't know that for sure until CMS comes out. We can only say that this is, that if it does come through, you would be eligible for this, but we can't say that outright at this point.
All right. And I know I think it's within the DDS website that providers can go to the section on transformation.
Mhm.
And again, just creating somewhat easy educational material that just kind of reiterates these points. Just thinking about how McDowell is creating communication things for families, maybe creating communication things for providers.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely on our radar, and it's just
Okay.
trying to figure out how to move forward with
Great.
that.
Okay.
And as I said, it's very touchy with the amended Appendix K that we don't want to give everybody's hopes up too high, even though we pretty confident this is going, but you never know until you see the writing on the wall. You just never know what they'll do, so.
Yep.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? The only last thing I want to do is on our piece, we've had these issues that are hanging out there. And one of them that has been hanging out there has to do with the rent subsidy issue. And so we have a committee that's been working on the rent subsidy issue. And so these are all proposed changes. We're working through this. We're hopefully going to get these finalized, but once again, I can't say for sure until they're finalized. But what we've been looking at proposing some of the changes for rent subsidy is there's a health and safety checklist that gets done. So we're looking at revising that and making that a little bit more user-friendly. We're reviewing the effect of a housemate moving out, and there are more bedrooms than the number of people living at the location. So how that will work in terms of rent subsidy. We're reviewing the percentage of the rent of other periodic and other payments as compared to fair rent, knowing that the cost of housing in Connecticut has gone up a whole lot. So we're looking at reviewing whether of increasing what we look at right now. We look at fair rent, but we're looking at it. We could look up to 130%. Now we're looking at whether we can go up to 140% of what the fair rent. So trying to bear in mind the cost of housing, how that's increased. We're reviewing the quarterly income verification reports. We're also reviewing the percentage of the recipient's share of the rent. Where we had it had to be up around 40%. We're now changing that to 30%. This would increase the amount of rent subsidy they would get. And then the other thing we're looking at is reviewing the payment of a security deposit. So those are all on the radar. They're all working their way through, and once those get signed off, I think it will be a big help for people as they move into their own apartments and stuff. So. And Peter, we are still working on residential issue. Hold on. Who's it? Where are we? Just got something. No, that is. Okay.
I said it, Peter, it was from me.
Oh, thank you. I'm sitting going. Well, are we still working on what was that? What was the question? We're still. Terry has had a personal matter to do, but he feels he's close to saying, oh, okay. So you're still working on that and you're going to get it back to us.
Yeah, we worked with Scott on day and IHS, but we just have the residential piece yet.
Okay. So good. All right, everybody, unless I have any other issues that somebody wants to bring forward right now, I'll ask for a motion to stop the meeting. Wins. First wins. Win makes the motion. Who seconds it?
Second.
Thank you. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank